So I heard by chance from a friend of mine who was a medical student that Professor Hans Eysenck was going to do a lecture at St. Thomas's Hospital. He was, at the time, probably the most famous psychologist in the world. He's very well known or notorious for his theories on IQ and intelligence, which suggest that black people are inferior, and lots of other controversial theories. But he was very accepted part of the establishment. He was a very, very big name. And this lecture was going to be about aversion therapy. It was hosted by a group called the London Medical Group, which was an association, organization of doctors and students in the medical profession in London. And they held seminars on topical issues of the day, and they chose aversion therapy. So it was about 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and I was the only person out of, there were 300 people at the GLF meetings. I was the only person who was free or willing or able to go. So I thought, well, okay, I'll give it a go. So I turned up at the appointed time, or shortly beforehand. And obviously I had no idea how to get into that meeting, because presumably it was by invite only. So I hovered around and saw people going into the lecture theatre, but noted that they were all being asked to show some form of ID, which I didn't have. So the next thing I did was did a recce around the lecture theatre to try and find a fire exit entrance or another entry in, but there wasn't any. Then by chance, I stumbled on an alcove where there was a white coat and a clipboard. So I thought, here you are. So I put on the white coat and the clipboard. And as I walked back, I noticed, I was going past reception again, and I noticed on the reception desk, there were all these little name tags. And so I hovered while the receptionist was distracted with someone who was asking questions and grabbed one of the name tags, flipped it on. And then I went to the entrance, doctor, was I coming? The name I used might have been Dr. Thompson, I can't remember. Anyway, I was just waved in. So when I got in, I sat a bit further up because it was one of these tiered lecture theatres. So I sat a bit up and then discreetly took off the coat and put it under the seat so I didn't want to be grabbed for stealing medical property. And then listened. And so the theory or the ideas of Dr. Eysenck were that homosexuality was a social problem, that people were unhappy being gay, that they wanted to change, they needed to change for society's benefit, and that aversion therapy was one way to do this. So he explained the method of electric shock aversion therapy. When I interjected to say, tell them about the pain, he said, oh, it's just like a visit to the dentist, a little bit of pain, nothing to worry about. A complete underestimation of the pain involved. And then he explained the other technique, which was drug-induced nausea. So what would happen is a person would be, again, strapped into a chair or onto a bed, given injections usually of a drug called apomorphine, which would then induce nausea, sometimes minor convulsions, but vomiting, defecation, urination, while they were being shown images of male pinups. So both of these are pretty gross and extreme. So throughout this lecture, I kept on challenging him. He kept on saying, wait to the questions at the end. I said, no, you're making so many statements that need to be questioned and challenged. You haven't provided much evidence. And in fact, the evidence you provided has been disputed. That program you talked about was withdrawn because it didn't work and it was abusive. So in the end, they got fed up, and I was grabbed and physically dragged out of the lecture theatre and dragged along the corridor, being kicked and punched, and then dumped in the street. I think it was on Lambeth Road, outside the back entrance of St Thomas's Hospital. I didn't feel that I had achieved much. Obviously, I think I'd been challenged. There was no media there to report it. But at least he hadn't got away with it without being questioned and challenged. So that was eventually, I wrote that up in Gay News, which is not long started. I think it was the 11th of November. 2nd of November, 1972, I wrote a short summary of what happened. I've since written up a much more extensive blow-by-blow account, which is on my website, petertatchell.net. You go into petertatchell.net and then look up LGBT, and the left-hand column, look up LGBT plus rights, and then go to psychiatry, and you'll see, I think the second or third from the bottom is a full account of what happened and so on.